Okay, so we've got a slightly controversial but important question here from Tabster33 on a community forum, and they have said, my question is this: do you think betting exchanges should be regulated like financial exchanges, and do you think large traders manipulate horse racing prices? Okay, so it's kind of two questions really there, but they're highly related, so I'll go for it here and I'm going to fire through both of them. I'll try not to spend too long on each. They are questions that are important to me, something that I've spent a huge amount of time thinking about, particularly the second one there, over time. So I've got a fair bit to say. Now, first of all, I'm assuming that, just kind of from your question there, you're saying that the betting exchanges should be treated like Forex, and I don't know, Bitcoin and other things like that are regulated, and I can understand why you would say that and why you would ask, but I think the overall issue is it worth it for the governing bodies and the government and all that kind of stuff to get involved? And there is already some regulation around betting as well, so it is a form of financial trading, you're right, on betting exchanges. People are exchanging their bets and money. It's on a far smaller scale than Forex and anything like that, which might not necessarily make it right that it shouldn't be regulated as heavily, but it's a case of, is it worth their time, I believe, anyway. So you've seen in the last couple of years, I've seen it, and being in the industry, that there's been a lot more of this know your customer and all that kind of stuff that's come through, and the government have enforced various things. So a lot of the exchanges are actually obligated to sort of vet customers and all that kind of stuff more than they were previously anyway, to my knowledge. So there is a bit more regulation around it, but I think what you're talking about there, Tabs, is slightly different, and I don't think that we'll actually reach a stage where betting exchanges are regulated really heavily like Forex and shares and Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. And the reason for that comes down to size, because for all that regulation to go in, it's actually going to make it kind of like not worth it so much for the betting companies to then provide the exchanges and the different services and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sort of bouncing around a little bit there. It's just some of my own spin on this, but I think the reason that it's not as heavily regulated is just because it's not really worth their time, and it's not big enough, and they believe that everything is covered enough by the existing betting regulation. So the second part, which is probably the most important part and the one that I'm most interested in, being, do you think large traders manipulate horse racing prices? Now, I think, to be completely honest, undoubtedly manipulation is going to be there. It's in the world no matter what you do. People are manipulative. Okay, so wherever you look, you'll find cases of people being manipulative, and also companies being manipulative, and big companies being manipulative. It's it's in the news every other day. So I think to look at a betting market and then turn around and think, well, everything here is going to be completely innocent, there's not going to be anybody trying to manipulate anything for their own personal gain, would be foolish. So the first thing to say is manipulation absolutely, definitely happens. And I also think, and I do believe, it's not a case of anybody shying away from it. It's something that's very hard to actually measure and stop and control within the markets. So that's partly why it exists as well. So there's a fine line to walk here as well with this, because you see it a lot, particularly with new people that are learning to trade. And there was a period through my own learning in the past where I was like this too, because there's a fine line between paranoia and actually being manipulated. And when you lose, sometimes the inclination is to go, oh, I'm being manipulated. And I mean, it could have been, but the majority of the time it wasn't necessarily being manipulated, or you weren't being manipulated in the way you thought you were being manipulated. It's kind of like a psychological get out for yourself, and just frustration and all those normal human emotions that build up too. So it's not to say that it's not there, it's just to say that there's a lot of blurred lines and confusion between the two, and obviously ultimately as end users we can't actually ever know, because we can't see other people's bets and their bet IDs. Only the people at the top of these big companies that run the exchanges have access to that, so we won't actually ever really know. Although, you know, I think it's fair to say it'd be foolish to say that it doesn't happen. So I think the markets are manipulated. Horse racing markets are more sentiment based than pretty much any other market on Betfair. I mean, you can look at like pre-race markets, or sorry, pre-match markets on football, and pre-match markets on tennis, and maybe even in play as well. But the most fluid ones with the most sentiment and indecision in the markets are certainly horse racing ones. So you're more likely to see it inside horse racing markets more than you are anywhere else. So I think that certainly addresses that issue there. And I know that, I mean, I don't want to say too much because it affects other people's business, but in the past people have sort of bragged about holding prices with large stakes, and it can be done. I've tried it myself as well, and I've been stung for it too, which is, you know, not wanting to turn everything on its head, but there's a positive side in this as well, because if somebody tries to manipulate the market, they are just a person too, and they're not perfect, and they may have good knowledge of the market, and they may have a lot of data and all that kind of stuff, but they make mistakes too at the end of the day, and then when they make mistakes, there's the opportunity to make a profit out of them as well. So, you know, in exchanges, everybody's riding each other back and forth, and all that kind of stuff happens. So I guess if anything, really, what I've just said there highlights the benefit of being smaller. So I think a lot of people feel that being smaller, with smaller stakes in the market, makes you more vulnerable, and in one sense it makes you, yes, more vulnerable and susceptible to being manipulated, although there is more freedom of movement and room for mistake when you're on smaller stakes. You haven't got that room when you're larger, so, you know, those people get caught out. There's certainly benefit in certain situations if you know what you're doing, if you can do it, if you've got the bankroll to do it, and then you've got the balls to do it as well. But I really don't think it's as much of a bigger issue that people sometimes think it is. But like I say, we can't say categorically, yes, I believe X person does this all the time. But I'm sure if they were to look at the accounts at Betfair, it might be a little more obvious as to who does those sort of things. But at the same time, those people are probably providing a large amount of liquidity because they're not going to be small players. So again, all the way back to the original thing that I said here when I started to answer this question is knowing the difference between the two isn't so easy, and it isn't always that clear, and you can't actually fully understand everybody's complete motivation as to why they've placed a bet, be it matched or unmatched in the markets. So, gone off on a tangent a little bit there, but that's the double prong question answer there for your tabs. I hope you're satisfied with that one. If there's any more to that, please submit in the comments below. I'll do my best to reply to everybody on an individual basis.